Hey, welcome to a new devlog video. This time I'd like to talk about the new terrain system that I've been working on in Rolling Line. So this is quite a major update, and this is going to change quite a lot about how people make maps in this game. In the way that multiplayer made a massive difference in gameplay, this one, the terrain editing, is probably the biggest update that map builders have gotten in quite a long time. And it's definitely going to make quite a big difference, especially for me with making the official maps. This is going to completely change how I go about making the terrain for official maps. So to summarize it, you can now use a sculpting tool to edit your terrain dynamically, all in-game. No 3D modeling software, no placing props on the ground. You can entirely just make your terrain in-game really easily with tools. And if I do stuff like this, you can extend your terrain out, you can paint it with different colors. Do an example of that. Yeah, you can paint the colors really easily. I'll talk more about all of this in detail later. But basically this system changes how you actually build the terrain for your maps. Firstly, I'd like to just show a few of the features of this new terrain system and what it can actually do. So, first of all, we've got this new tool which looks like a box cutter, which is the sculpting tool. And this has all the options related to moving and adjusting the terrain. So you've got your basic stuff like adding more height, which will just grow the terrain and rise it up. And you can scale this right down just to do individual vertexes or larger areas. And of course you've got remove, which just does the opposite and sinks things down. You'll notice there it's going underneath the water level. I'll talk a bit more about the water level later. But you also have smooth, which just sort of averages out the height of everything under the selector. So, you know, good for removing spiky parts of the terrain. You've got flatten, which when you first click your mouse down, it will choose the height under your mouse, and then if you keep holding your mouse down, it will flatten everything else to that height, like you'll see happening here, where it just flattens out everything to that level amount, and you can see everything there is now flat. Match track, I don't have any track here, so can't really show it, but it's the same thing as flatten, except it just matches the height of a piece of track. So you can follow the track along with your cursor, and it will move all of the terrain up to the height of the track. One of the more interesting ones is cut hole. When I was designing this terrain system, something that was really important to me was that you can actually make gaps in the terrain. So this means, I'll show what it looks like. Look, you can make a hole in the terrain, and that is now an actual empty collision area. You can fall through it and just jump through it. But yeah, that is now a gap that you can use, and you can fill it with props, you can do all sorts of things, and you can use that to make tunnels or caves, or just even use it for cliffs if you want to just make more interesting terrain than what the actual system is providing. But the reason I really wanted to make sure that this system was in the game is because I've seen terrain systems on other games which just do not feature this basic functionality of cutting a hole in the terrain you've got. And it's extremely limiting. Like, you'll find quite quickly there's a lot of things you just can't build if you can't actually make a hole in the terrain. And of course you can fill the hole back again, just like that, and then it all comes back. Yeah. But this is how you go about making like a tunnel portal, for example. You would cut a little hole where the tunnel is, and then move the terrain around to fit the gap, and then use the actual tunnel portal props around it to make it look nice. But to make that easier, another feature I put here, which is quite unique to Rolling Line, is this move vertex option. And as you can see with this grid, everything in this terrain is just vertices, so you can actually move them around. And this is incredibly useful for fine-tuning your terrain and making it look exactly how you want it to. The reason I added this is because when I make terrain myself for the official maps, which I do in Blender and 3D software, I just always like to shift these vertices around a lot, and it's especially useful when you're doing coloring and adding colors, which I'll talk about soon, because you don't want these hard edges everywhere. when you're putting colors down. You want to have these nice flowing curves in the mesh. So with this Move Vertex tool, you can do exactly that. You can completely customize how you want these vertices to look. And I reckon the main difference between terrain that looks really nice and terrain that looks a bit crap is whether you're actually going to the effort of adjusting the vertices like this just to make those curves look a little bit nicer. The next big part of this system is the painting feature. So this right here is the paint gun, which is a new tool that you can use. And the way this works is you can directly paint any color you want onto the terrain. And like in this case, you can use it to make a bit of a beach effect. And of course you can scale this smaller if you want to be more precise and just fill in like a very small area. I find this very useful for just making those edges look a bit nicer. And the other half of this is you can select colors as well using the second option. So I can switch that back to green and then fill in these ones that went a bit further than I was hoping and make it look all a bit nicer, like that. And you can combine this very well with the vertex, Move Vertex feature. As I was saying before, how you can just adjust these just to look a little bit nicer and get those edges looking a bit less sharp. But with this color system, this is entirely, linked in with how the rest of the colors in the game work. So you can just paint this tool with a new color, or of course selecting it, which is a lot easier. Yeah, so you can paint it like this, and then you've got, say, bright blue. But you can also just switch over to the select and then select it over here, and then go back to your map and paint it. But yeah, there's no limit on the colors you can use. Any terrain piece can have as many colors as you want. This was another big limitation behind the scenes that I wanted to make sure wasn't a problem, because if you've ever worked with game engines before, things like Unity and Unreal Engine, you often run into a situation where the amount of different textures you can apply to a piece of terrain is quite limited. Sometimes it's extremely limited. And I wanted to make sure that the system I have here that I've made is able to basically handle as many colors as you can throw at it. You can just keep adding new colors, it's not going to complain. The way this actually works under the hood is it generates a texture where every pixel on the texture refers to a color being used on the terrain. And as you add new colors to it, that texture is updated to add those new colors. And then the terrain mesh itself is just UV mapped, each face of this mesh is UV mapped onto that texture. And that's why a interesting feature here you can do is if you edit a piece of terrain and go into its options menu here, you can actually go into replace colors. And these are basically just the colors on that UV texture. So if I go and grab a bright blue and then replace the green, it will replace it for the whole thing, because all that has actually done is replace the pixel on the texture for this piece of terrain with a different color. And I just find it quite satisfying that everything in this terrain system is using the features that are already in the game. Like, this didn't require a new texturing system, it didn't require a new color system, it's just entirely using the colors that are already in the game. I'll also explain how to actually make tables. So when you go into the room category, there's a new drawer here for dynamic tables, and you can grab one of these and just plonk it on the ground, and you'll notice there's these new arrows. So you can actually click these arrows to extend the terrain, which means you no longer have to grab a new terrain piece every time. But if you want to make like a smooth edge, you can still do that. So you can grab one of these and put a smooth edge in there, or do a diagonal as well, things like that. And these terrain pieces will automatically smooth to match what you're extending them from. So for example here, with this hill, you can click that plus and you'll actually get that hill continuing. And same with this, you'll get it matching all of that. Another interesting part of this system that is quite unique to Rolling Line is how it handles water levels. And in this little coastal example I've made here, you can see how the table edge, so the black edge of this table, actually meets the water level. which is an effect you'll see in real model railways. When people build a model railway, you'll often have little hills and stuff, and the hills are clipped off where the wall ends. And if you've got like a lake or something, that edge, that panel, will just go up to the water level. Or you can even choose to have it not there and actually have a scene going on underwater, like you might want some details down there. But by default, this edge actually goes up to the water level, and you can, this is all completely dynamic. So if I go in and add some height over here, it'll start rising up above, and the water level will stay down low. And of course, you can also go into the options menu and do water options, and then untick the edges match water, and then you will be able to see down there. Also, here's just a couple of little scenes I've been working on, just to demonstrate how this terrain system can actually be used in practice to make some quite pretty scenery. Here's like a sort of classic New Zealand mountain, snow-capped peaks, rocks, trees, and then you've got that all coming along to the edge there. You can really see how that edge panel matches the terrain, how it looks quite nice. I really love that feature. In all the official maps that I make, I always make use of that, but I've done it all through 3D software, and it's quite exciting to be able to do this in game now really easily. And another example over here of a bit of a West Coast New Zealand scene, specifically the Fox River, which is a beautiful place. There's a whole bunch of caves over there, and if you've ever seen my posts about that, I do a lot of caving in real life. I absolutely love it. And I've done a bunch of stuff in this area of the West Coast, and this example here is how you can actually make a cave entrance in your terrain. So even though this terrain goes all through this, you can actually cut a hole in it and then surround it by rocks to make a proper entrance, and look out there. It doesn't actually go anywhere. I haven't added anything to it yet. But this is just a more detailed example, includes a river as well. And just out the back here as well, I got another West Coast scene using a reference image there. This is a famous bridge where the road merges with the railway tracks, and both cars and trains have to share the right of way. Just thought I'd make that as a little bit of a test scene. And this is just showing how you can make the terrain really nicely match roads and track, and also get the colours going through there as well. Yeah, just a few little examples of using the terrain system. So lastly, just to finish off, I'd like to actually show the old method that I was using to make official maps for the game. I believe I've talked about this before in a few guides on Steam and such, but here is the actual view inside Blender of the Tuolumne terrain, so for the Sierra logging map. This is one big 3D model with a very similar look of the solid colours for each area, and it also has these little walls, just like the new terrain system in the game. I used to have to make these manually, and it was a huge pain in the ass. It takes forever, and it's always quite tricky to get these to line up. But that was very much the style of how I was making the official maps. So when I went about making the in-game terrain system, I basically wanted to recreate this process of what I would do in 3D modeling software, except in-game, so that everyone can do it much easier, instead of having to need to know how to use software like Blender. But if I edit this, you can actually see the meshes, and it should probably look quite familiar to what the in-game terrain is like. You can even see how I've just got like the different colors, like this area here is all one color, and the hard edges of each triangle is where that color ends. And you can kind of see how, for example, the mesh editing feature, the vertex editing feature is exactly like this. It's what I'm doing in Blender to make these lines look a bit nicer, is exactly what's happening in game. And you've also got like those holes for the tunnel portal, like over here. You can see there's a hole cut there for the tunnel to go through, and that is all now done in game. There is still definitely a place for these old modding systems, because remember, this isn't just developer only. You can make terrain mods in the game, which is basically a system for letting you import your own 3D models like this. And I've definitely seen quite a feee people make use of that, where they'll make really advanced terrain in 3D software like this and then import it into the game, and to be able to make some really professional looking stuff. But there is still a good use for that modding system, because there's a lot of stuff that the terrain system can't necessarily do. For example, things like this little bit where you can go underneath the table. You could make something similar to that in the terrain system, but more detailed examples would start to get quite complicated. Like say if you wanted a big staging yard underneath your layout with lots of little gaps and things, it just could honestly just probably be a lot easier to do it in 3D modeling software than it is to try and do it in game. But in general, the in-game system is going to almost completely replace this. I will probably, for future official maps, use a combination of the two. So I'll probably use the dynamic in-game terrain system for most of the terrain, but for certain complicated things, especially relating to the room itself, so like the walls and the roof and the floor of the room you're in, I'll probably still use terrain modding for that. So I'll still make a big 3D model like this for that. Just because it gives so much more freedom of customization. I mean, it's just a 3D model, you can do whatever you want with it. But yeah, I'm really happy with how the in-game terrain system has worked out, and I really think it's going to be absolutely revolutionary for map making. And I think once people actually get their hands on it and see what it's like, it will really, really change how this game works. I'm quite excited to actually release it and make it public. So yeah, thanks for listening. I hope this was a little bit more of an in-depth look as to how this system works.